screws into here. If you've got a young kid or something that's into model building, using their tiny little hands to help with this, I would imagine would be a tremendous asset. I don't know if you can see, but I mean that is one tiny little screw there. But it is coming together. I wouldn't exactly say this has been a piece of cake, but we are making progress. Okay, so we've got this piece identical to this photo, so we're on the right track. Ensuring that the flat end of that is still facing up, click the assembled hinge into the socket on 4E. So it looks like we're looking at Mr. Fusion upside down here. So looks like this needs to go in there like so. And then of course it's going to want us to drive another screw in, which would have been easier if we would have done this in a different order. Kind of thinking the model builders were not thinking ahead on these steps here. So we're going to need another AP screw. After messing around with those other screws, these don't seem quite so bad. We got one here. I want to make sure we have this on correctly so I don't have to screw it back on there. So it looks like that is correct. And then we screw it into this frame. If I can actually get it to do it. Again, not going to tighten all these down, because I have a hunch that some of these pieces are going to need to move. Anyway, that should be step 10, if I did it correctly. Okay, now we need the two springs and thread them into the two red shafts. Oh boy. This should be a real treat. So, here's our springs, which are as tiny as the screws are, if not tinier. See, dump those out here. We'll have to clamp the tweezers on too badly. Okay, so here's one. Okay, so we got one spring into place, if you can see that on the camera. Now if you look at step 12 here, we're going to be running two screws at the top to hold the springs in place. Only an idiot would put both springs in there without driving the screws in, because while you're screwing one in, the other one's going to fall out. So we're going to do one of these at a time, because that's the smart way to do it. So I want us to use those microscopic screws again. So we got one here, and then we need to drive it down through the top, which is at a horrible angle. almost wondering if I'm putting this incorrect, but that's what the diagram says. I don't even know if I'm going to be able to get the screw in there because of the angle it's at. I'm trying to be gentle here and not break the thing. It looks like it is going in, just very slowly. Be very, very careful to get the end of the screw through the spring. Otherwise, we're going to have a whole bunch more problems. And I did it. Now, again, we're not going to tighten that down because I'm not really sure where we're going to be going with that. So, now we have the honor and privilege of trying to cram the second spring in there. Okay, looks like the spring's in place. Now let's see if we can get another one of these microscopic screws on there. For those of you who've been following my channel, what we're doing here with Mr. Fusion is more unpleasant than replacing the fall on that whip that we did a couple of weeks ago. This is just absolutely ridiculous what we got going on here. I think they should have made this model a little bit bigger. Okay, so we've got both springs on there, more or less. And it wants us to test the assembled hinge to make sure that there's a smooth action with the springs. Well, I'm not quite sure how they want us to test that. I'm guessing it's supposed to move backwards, but don't know. Okay, so I guess it's just supposed to fasten with Mr. Fusion like so. But that does look correct. So if that is correct, then our springs function the way they should have. So it looks like we may be able to tighten all this down. However, we're not going to bother with that. We can do that off camera. So moving along, we've got our frame here. And it's going to sit on here with the hinge part facing the back. I'm assuming this is going to be the back. So we're just going to put that on there like that. And screw it down on the bottom. Which, knowing this model so far, is going to be way easier said than done. So, they're wanting us to use 3 AP screws. Strange, because I think we're reaching the end of this build for this particular section, and this diagram has not even mentioned those DP screws that we needed. So, strange. But, problem avoided, hopefully. Okay, so we're going to turn this over and see if we can get these screws lined up at the bottom of Mr. Fusion. Again, we're probably not going to tighten these down quite as much as we should, so we've got some wiggle room here. for those of you that are planning on building the Back to the Future car from the original movie, you can avoid this entire headache. Just saying. Okay, and there it is. And that should be the finished piece. Let's go on to the next page, although I think that's going to be it. And that is it. Okay, so here's what Mr. Fusion looks like. I'll tighten down all the screws on it later. And here's what the reactor looks like, for those of you who want to build the original. A couple of concerns here that I have right off the bat are the fact that this thing did not click into place like it should have. If we end up fastening it to the car that way, that's definitely going to need some glue to stay in place, which means this thing will no longer be able to turn like it does in the film. And we've also got the issue of those posts in the diagram that are not there for whatever the reason. So that may come back and bite us later as well. Hopefully not. And we've got this piece right here that was supposed to snap into the top of Mr. Fusion and did not. So that's probably going to need some glue as well. But overall, I'd say we're still on the right track. But yeah, that was a huge pain in the butt. So hopefully this vehicle or this video was helpful for the people who are working on this build. That's it for this episode, guys. Take care, and I'll see you next issue.